Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. If you're tuning into the show for the first time, this show is designed to be more than just something interesting for you to listen to on your Saturday morning. This is the show designed to change your health and change your future so that you can live a long, functional, productive life. And we do that by using totally natural solutions, drug-free, surgery-free solutions to some of today's most complicated, difficult health problems. So I'm so glad you're with us today. I'm here with my co-host, Brandon Como. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing good. You know, one of the things I enjoy most about getting to do this show with you, in the sense of getting to run it and getting to jump in and ask you questions, is the fact that there's a lot of misconceptions out there that you make it your mission to be able to address. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been put out there by people that are trying to sell their products that are just flat out wrong and flat out false. And that's one thing that you always make sure you want to address, is that the right information is getting out so that way we can live our healthiest lives.
Well, thank you for that, man. I tell you, that's kind of my mission. You know, my purpose is to try to just help as many people as possible live a better life. Because, guys, listen, life is too short to be sick and tired and ran down and diseased. There's a better way. And I have today one of the most important shows that we've ever done here on Get Well Acadiana. This is a big one, guys. We're starting a series of shows called The Truth About Cholesterol and Heart Disease. And I've had so many people ask me to do this show over, you know, the last almost year now, I guess. And so here it is. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, listen, if you regularly tune into this show, you know me by now and know that I only deal in researched statistical facts. You know, you can't come on the radio and just say whatever you think might be true. And I hope that you guys will keep an open mind about this, because we're going to get into this idea of cholesterol and saturated fats and heart disease and statin drugs over the next few shows. And I'm going to be quoting some of the most world-renowned cardiologists, some of the leading researchers in the country from Harvard and Mount Sinai Hospital and Mayo Clinic, and what they're saying after reviewing and rethinking this whole cholesterol idea. Now, if I were to ask 10 people on the street, does cholesterol cause heart attacks? Brandon, what do you think all 10 of those people would say?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they absolutely
Maybe
would.
You would have one that wouldn't, but yeah, I would say I'd bet all 10 would.
Yeah, and that's not really what the research shows. And so I think people are going to be surprised. Now, if you ask 10 people, does eating saturated fats cause heart disease? Almost all of them are going to say, you know, absolutely.
It just sounds dirty, saturated.
Yeah, it does. And they've demonized it a little bit over, since really the 60s. And is lowering your fat intake in your diet important to prevent heart disease? Most people would say yes. So we're going to examine where all these ideas came from and what the research actually shows. And I think you guys are going to be really surprised at what you learn over these next couple of shows. And listen, this is not what I think. This is what the research shows. This is some quotes from some of the top cardiologists in the country, and what they've now discovered the truth is about saturated fat and cholesterol and heart disease and all of the research on that and how we even got here. And what you're going to see is how absolutely antiquated and out of date this saturated fat and cholesterol theory actually is. So let me start off by saying that cholesterol is a very important thing we have to have in our body. Most people don't realize that. They think if I could take every cholesterol particle out of your body, would that be a good thing? Most people say yes. Cholesterol is a major component to brain and nerve tissue. So your brain and your nerves are made from cholesterol. They have to have cholesterol. So it's no wonder that as statin use has increased, so did dementia and Alzheimer's and nerve-related disorders. There's been a 600% increase in neurological disorders. Well, I wonder why. If you look at the use of this demonization of cholesterol and dementia and Alzheimer's and neurological disorders, they're almost identical. Cholesterol is also what your body uses to make hormones like testosterone and estrogen. And so as your body builds testosterone or your body builds estrogen, the building block of that is it starts with a cholesterol molecule. Most people don't know that either. So again, no wonder we've seen all these hormonal problems and male hormonal problems and ED problems. It's because we're cutting everyone's cholesterol to the point where they don't have the building blocks that they need. And the graphs of these cholesterol medications and these disorders go up almost, remarkably identical. If you'll look at the use of these things and some of these other disorders that are almost a side effect of everyone cutting their cholesterol as low as possible. And all of this is starting to really make sense. And so I'm just going to start by saying that cholesterol and heart disease are not the same thing. So if someone finds out, yes, I have high cholesterol, and then you ask them later, well, do you have heart disease? They go, yes, I have high cholesterol. That is not the same thing. Having high cholesterol and having heart disease is two totally different things. And cholesterol does not cause heart attacks. And truthfully, it's not even a good predictor of it. 50% of Americans go to the hospital with heart attacks have normal cholesterol. And at least 50% of the patients with high cholesterol have normal, healthy hearts. So literally, it's a flip of the coin, whether cholesterol and heart disease have anything in common whatsoever. And I wanted to start by saying that a lot of this information that I'm giving you today comes from several researchers. A lot of what I'm quoting today comes from a book called The Great Cholesterol Myth by Dr. Steven Sinatra, who's a board-certified cardiologist, renowned researcher. He's an icon in this field. And Dr. John Bowden, their book is called The Great Cholesterol Myth. And so a lot of this stuff comes from the research that they've compiled. They did a lot of the work compiling a lot of this research, and I just get to come on here and tell you about it. But statin drugs are now a $100 billion business. So we've created this disease called hypercholesterolemia. We've diagnosed it, we've stamped it, we've prescribed it, and it's now statins are the number one selling drug of all time. And so we're going to get into all this later on how all of this came about and what all of this means. And so I hope that you guys will keep an open mind because, this new research is quite an eye opener. And some of this, I was even surprised whenever I started really looking at how we started looking at cholesterol as a cause of heart disease and how that research and the studies that were done. And, I was even really surprised myself. And you're going to find out later in the show that there is one single cholesterol particle that makes a difference in heart disease, and it deals with the particle type. So there is one marker that deals with cholesterol that causes or creates heart disease. But the one particle that matters, we don't test for it. So yet we're treating high cholesterol with medicines with, multiple and serious side effects, and they're being wildly overprescribed. And I'm looking at an article right here entitled "Thousands Sue for Damages Against Cholesterol Drugs as Big Pharma Defends $100 billion Industry." So these articles are out there. And the truth is, I have a drawer full of these type of articles and this type of research. And, I can only come on here and do so much about research. I know that gets kind of in the weeds and it gets kind of boring. And, nobody wants to hear some of these research topics. So I'm going to give you kind of the overview of what that research topic says. And, the connection between having cholesterol problems and dying from heart disease is a stretch. The connection is sketchy at best. And at worst, one researcher and cardiologist put it, the greatest scam ever perpetrated on mankind. Not my words, one of these, renowned researchers' words. So I would encourage all of you to research this for yourself. Don't take anyone's word for it, including mine. Look this stuff up yourself. I know that all my facts are backed up by the best researchers in the country. And, I'm here to tell you guys this whole thing needs to be looked at and investigated and find out how we got here. What do we need to do to truly prevent heart attack deaths? Because what we're doing now is not working. The statistics are pretty obvious that that's a fact. What we're doing now to prevent dying from heart disease is not working, and it hasn't been since the 50s and 60s. Now, the idea that saturated fat is such a bad thing and it needs to be demonized, and the only reason that you've ever been told not to eat saturated fat is heart disease. So we've thrown out one of the best diets for diabetes and obesity because of this notion that eating saturated fat would give you heart disease. And, we were told that if you eat saturated fat, that your cholesterol and your heart problems were going to go through the roof. And that's not what the research shows. People that go on this high-fat diet, and when I say high-fat diet, I'm talking about more like the Mediterranean diet where lots of anti-inflammatory, high, healthy fats like avocados and olive oils and coconut oils. People that go on this diet, their lipid numbers get better. Their heart attack rates go down, not up. And at worst, they don't change at all. Like nothing gets worse or better. So the kind you want them to have is the healthy saturated fats like coconut oil and olive oil and avocados, and those are the kind of high fat items that we're talking about here that are actually very, very good for you. And so it's hard to study saturated fat and heart disease because that takes a long time. That needs to be like a 20 or 30 year study. But it's easy to study saturated fat and cholesterol. You can do that in 6 months or so. And then they make the leap that because saturated fat changed cholesterol, that now that cholesterol is going to go and cause heart disease. And that's why these studies get sort of changed into something that they don't really say. So the two largest studies on this were two meta-analysis studies on heart disease by some of the leading research. And what a meta-analysis means is they take research from all of the research articles, and then they throw out the biased ones and they throw out the bad ones, and they look at the best research and they say, what do all of these research topics tell us? And in the two largest studies on that, they found that when it comes to eating saturated fat and developing heart disease, nothing happened. And I'll quote from the study. They say, results and conclusions about saturated fat intake in relationship to cardiovascular disease from leading industry community did not reflect the available scientific literature. There is no scientific evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with increased cardiovascular disease. Can you imagine that? So we've been hearing that now since the 50s, that if we eat too much saturated fat, heart disease is going to go up. And it's not there. And one group they fed them, so they took two groups of people in another study, and one group they fed them the typical, quote, heart healthy Western diet, low in saturated fat, low in cholesterol, high in carbohydrates. And the other group they fed them the Mediterranean style diet. The Western diet had three times more deaths. And in fact, they actually had to stop the study midstream because they thought it was too unethical to continue to have these people eat this Western diet because they had too many deaths from it. So, by the way, the Mediterranean group, their cholesterol never changed, had nothing to do with it. So when I get back from this break, I'm going to tell you about how this all came about. How did we get here? And how did we become so paranoid about saturated fat and cholesterol? And how did we demonize it to the point to where statin drugs are the number one selling drug on the planet? And I'm going to go through those studies they used to determine that cholesterol was actually bad for us. And you'll see it's pretty sketchy. I think you'll be surprised. Now, I also want to let you guys know before break that I'm going to be hosting an amazing workshop on all of these topics called The Truth About High Cholesterol, High Blood Pressure, and Heart Disease. This is going to be a life-saving workshop, probably the most important workshop that we've ever done. at Bryant Wellness. And we're going to break all of these facts down. Some of this stuff is so hard to go over on the radio because I've got graphs and research topics, and that's just such a hard stretch to make sometime. And I hope you guys follow me on some of this, but I just try to do my best to give you guys researched facts, but not make the show so boring. And I'm trying to walk a line there. But we're going to show you the very best new research on ways you can keep your heart healthy for the rest of your life and possibly avoid the serious side effects of some of these medications. It's going to be April the 30th at 6:30 p.m. in Broussard. You can register by calling 837-7174 and leave your name on the machine, and my staff will call you back Monday to give you locations and more information and get your seat registered. So that's 837-7174, or you can text the word truth to 77453. Truth. And it'll pop right up on our computer, and we'll call you Monday. Now, in New Iberia, Dr. Fontenot's hosting the same workshop. His number is 367-2567. So we're going to get into this when we get back from the break, so don't go away. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're having a life-changing discussion today on the latest facts on saturated fat, cholesterol, heart disease, and statin drugs. And this is probably the most important show that we've ever done here on Get Well Acadiana. And, you know, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we're at with this cholesterol idea? Well, believe it or not, this cholesterol thing all started with rabbits at the turn of the century. There were some experiments by some Russians with rabbits, and they found that if you fed rabbits a whole bunch of cholesterol, they would get plaquing on their arterial walls. Now, the fact that rabbits are herbivores and don't really eat meat or fat, I guess never occurred to them. In fact, if you feed dogs or baboons the same diet, that does not happen. But they floated this idea that if you eat cholesterol, you're going to get plaquing on your arteries. So in the 60s and 70s, this idea kind of stumbled along for a while. It never had been proven. And then in the 60s and 70s, more and more people started coming back from the war, and they were getting heart disease sort of in this, more like in the 50s. And then in the 60s, it kind of became even worse. So there was sort of this public outcry, like something has to be done about all of this heart disease. So there was a man named Ancel Keys who came up with this theory that maybe it's because we're eating too much fat and cholesterol, and I bet that's the connection. So he designed a study now famously called the 7 country studies. And they took dietary fat intake and death from cardiac heart disease. And if you line these 7 countries up, the least fat intake had the less heart attacks, and the most fat intake had the most heart attacks. It was identical. You could draw a line. It looked like it was proven without a doubt. Very simple. Saturated fat goes up, heart disease goes up. Now, he was a very well-known and very respected researcher in his field, and he pushed this theory very hard. Eating high fat, high cholesterol makes high blood fat and cholesterol, and therefore causes heart disease. And Ancel Keys got everyone to accept it. The AMA, the American Diabetes Association, everybody bought in. Cholesterol was tried, convicted, and now it just seems like it's the fact. But actually, if you go back and look at the truth on that study, there was more than 7 countries. There was 22 countries. And if you apply that chart to all 22 countries, they're all over the place. There's no linear relationship whatsoever. Some high-fat countries have very low heart disease. Some low-fat countries have very high heart disease. There's no connection between the two when you look at all of the countries in the study. So this is an example of how studies get handpicked to prove certain points. But at this point, Big Pharma was involved, and they started pouring money into this idea. And 40 years later, we now have a $100 billion statin industry. People are experiencing significant side effects, and there are millions and millions of people looking for better answers. One researcher looked at all this named Walter Willett. He's the most respected nutritional epidemiologist in the country, if not in the world. He's also the head of the nutritional department at Harvard School of Public Health, and he's the lead researcher on the two most important research studies done on nutritional epidemiology. And after 30 years of looking into this, this was his quote: "The relationship of fat intake to health is an area I've studied over the last 20 years and found no relationship of the percentage of calories of fat in the diet and any important health outcome." Now, another researcher named George Mann, really famous researcher and author, calls it the greatest scam ever perpetrated on mankind. Dr. Ernest Curtis, a leading cardiologist, stated that when he was just out of school, he fully believed that cholesterol was the problem with heart disease. That's what he had been taught, ferociously taught that in school. Like, it was 100% taught to him as a fact. But he noticed once he got into practice that a lot of his heart attack patients came in with their cholesterol was all over the place. Some had high, some had low. So he began to look into this. And he said, seeing as how we're taught that these are proven facts, but now looking at how this research was so flimsy, at best, he began to so how the research was so flimsy at best, he began to rethink that. So that was his quote. So there is one particular particle that you need to know about whenever it comes to cholesterol. And it is somewhat of a predictor or a cause of plaquing in the arterial walls. And it's not this good and bad cholesterol that you've been hearing about for 20 years. There's a certain type of particle that is small, dense, and sticky. But guess what? We don't even test for this one. And you know why we don't test for this one? Because insurance doesn't cover it. So we're throwing out one of the most important tests, really the only important test whenever it comes to cholesterol levels, because insurance doesn't cover it. So we're going to get into this some more right after this next break. We're going to talk more and more about this important particle and what you should know about it and how you should get tested for it. And if you're very interested in this, if this is something that you find is going to be the best pathway for your heart and your health in the future, I wanted to invite you to register to our upcoming workshop called The Truth About Cholesterol, High Blood Pressure, and Heart Disease. And it's going to be one of the most important workshops that we've ever done. We're going to show you things that you can do in order to live a long, healthy life. And we're going to go through some simple things you can do at home and some important research on this to determine what your underlying reason is that your heart is not working correctly. And it's going to be an amazing workshop. So the number is 837-7174 in Broussard. Mine in Broussard is going to be April 30th, and in New Iberia, theirs is going to be the very next night on May the 1st, I believe. Now, I wanted to tell you, we do have a limited seating for this one, and I know this one's going to fill up quickly. I think our room only holds about 45 people at the most. So if you want in, you need to call right away and get in. Leave your name and number on the machine, and we'll call you back Monday when we get to work. It's 837-7174, or text the word TRUTH to 77453, and in New Iberia, it's 367-2567. Wait till you hear what I have coming up right after this break. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. We're discussing the truth about cholesterol today, and I want to encourage you guys to really research this stuff for yourself. Don't take my word for it. You can Google any of these items and just pull up tons of research, and you can get on YouTube and watch videos of these cardiologists talking about this subject and what they now know about the truth is on cholesterol and how this has been blown just so out of control and that so many of these these side effects have been just swept under the rug, and this idea is so ingrained in the American public. It took decades to get this so ingrained in people's minds that cholesterol is the enemy. It's going to take decades to change that, but I'm going to tell you, this is going to be seen in our future as one of the really the silliest things, one of the biggest wastes that we've ever done, this demonizing saturated fats and cholesterols the way they have. And so my purpose by doing this is just to help people. It doesn't affect me if you treat your cholesterol the right way or not. My purpose is to try to help people understand and try to help people live a healthier, longer life. And because people just don't know what to do. They don't realize that what they're doing is all wrong whenever it comes to heart disease, and that there's such a more common sense way to treat and make your heart healthier. And I do need to say, though, for legal reasons, I am by no means telling anyone to change their medication over the radio. That's between you and your healthcare provider, or you and your family. And so I just kind of wanted to get that out there. I'm not telling you to stop or change your medication whatsoever. Now, let's talk a little bit about what this cholesterol molecule is. Cholesterol is the building block for hormones in your body, and it's also critical to nerve and brain tissue. Now, in the 60s, you were given one number. Your cholesterol, ma'am, is 240. And then they realized about a decade later that there's actually two groups. You know, there's high density and low density, and one's good for you and one's bad for you. And then they started giving you two numbers, and the one number thing was outdated. And so now you have one good and one bad. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, that's totally outdated. And people just don't know that yet. But there are 5 types of cholesterol, 5 types of particles that you should know, not just 2. And in this particle test, it's the only test that means anything when it comes to cholesterol. Because one of these particle types, or actually 2 of them, are small, dense, and sticky particles. These are the ones that you do not want. And when one cardiologist was looking at this, for this test response, they asked him, why don't you do this why don't you do this particle test? And he said, well, because insurance doesn't cover it. So we're going to keep testing everything that doesn't matter to make the insurance company happy, instead of doing what's good for the patient. You know, when my patients come into me, I work for them. They hire me to do a job. And the truth is, out there, you know, for you guys listening, if you're one of those that's only willing to do what your insurance covers to make you healthy, the sad truth of it is you're just never going to achieve health. And sometimes you get people that are, if my insurance don't cover it, I'm not doing it. You're probably never going to be able to achieve a higher level of health like that. And it's just the unfortunate, cold, hard fact of the situation. So the bottom line of this is that this particle test is the most important test for cholesterol. And we're lulling people into this false belief that, well, my cholesterol numbers are pretty good, so I'm not going to have a heart attack. And that's the most unfortunate thing of this whole deal. Americans are walking around there falsely believing that they're safe because they've brought their cholesterol point down 10 points. And the studies and statistics just don't show that. And, you know, these small, dense, sticky particles will not hurt you unless you have one thing. So even the bad ones, even the small, sticky particles won't hurt you unless you have one thing in your body, and that is inflammation. Your body uses these small, sticky particles to plaque over inflammation. So let me say that again. You can imagine like spackling on your wall. Your body uses these small, sticky cholesterol particles to plaque over inflammation in the body. So if your arterial walls are inflamed, this plaquing is going to stick to them. And if your arterial walls are not inflamed, then they will not stick to them. They cannot hurt you. The problem in America is inflammation. Americans are more inflamed than they've ever been. So we do have to test these particles because everyone is so inflamed, they still need that test. Even though if they weren't inflamed, it wouldn't hurt them. The American diet is the most inflammatory diet you could possibly write. We have more toxins than ever before. We're more stressed than we've ever been, getting less sleep than we've ever been, and less hydrated than we've ever been, with more omega-6 inflammatory fatty acids in our diet than we've ever before. So we are creating the perfect stage for inflammation, and that's the real secret here. Is inflammation is the cause of our arterial walls to become plaqued. And if you want to know more about this, you're more than welcome to come to my workshop called The Truth About High Cholesterol, High Blood Pressure, and Heart Disease. It's going to be April the 30th at 6:30 p.m. in Broussard. So the number to register for that is 837-7174. Just leave your name and number on the machine, 837-7174, or text the word truth to 77453. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the show today. And this is an important one, guys. This is something I want everybody to look at and research for yourself. Come to this workshop. Let me show you what the actual research and studies show. And let me show you what these cardiologists are now starting to realize. And listen, guys, by the time it's going to be another 2 decades by the time this trickles through to, you're just a corner lot healthcare facility where, they're not still stuck on this eat a low fat diet and, get your cholesterol down and you'll prevent heart attacks thing. It's going to take a while. It took decades for us to get here. It's going to take a long time for us to, everybody to kind of get on board with that there's now such a better way, and that this has now pretty much been almost completely disproven. And so the number one thing that I wanted to go through on this segment is that fat does not make you fat. Eating fat does not give you heart attacks. There's been study after study to prove this now. And, the first time I heard about this, and when I was in school, I was in graduate school going for my doctorate degree, and Dr. Adkins actually came to our school, and I heard him speak. And understand, this is 1997. This was 20 years ago. And at that time, the best, healthiest diet you could do is low fat, low saturated fats, eat lots of grains, eat lots of healthy carbohydrates. Remember the days of baked potatoes with no butter and salads with low fat salad dressing and fat free everything you could get. You would eat a baked potato with no butter and go to spin class. That was known as the healthy diet of the time. And Dr. Adkins gets on stage at our school and tells us the exact opposite is true. That fats reduce inflammation and reduce your chance of heart disease. And it's one of the best ways to lose weight. And I hate to tell you this, but he was almost harassed off the stage. Because, of course, this is now 20 years later, and we now know that he was right. Of course, at the time, we were young interns in our white jackets and thought we knew everything. We didn't. He did. And we were using the old food pyramid, where carbohydrates and grains are on bottom and saturated fats are at the very, very top, and you should avoid them as much as you can. Well, that didn't work out, did it? Obesity's through the roof. Heart attacks are through the roof. Diabetes is through the roof. We have more obesity than ever. That pyramid did not work. It's time to move on. Fat does not make you fat. Sugar makes you fat. Sugar is the demon in your diet, not fat. Grains are inflammatory. Sugar is inflammatory. And the only reason we've ever been told to eat a low-fat diet was because you were told you would get heart disease and cholesterol, and the studies just aren't there. Most traditional doctors are 20 years behind this research, but I'm telling you, All of the new research is just proving every time it's looked at. And when I say sugar, I don't just mean the white powdered stuff you pour in your coffee. Hopefully you don't, but that you pour in your coffee in the morning. You have to understand there's tons of foods that turn into sugar. By the time you start chewing them, your body is already turning them into sugar. The body responds exactly like you would have if you would have taken a big spoonful of sugar and put it in your mouth. So this low-fat diet makes no sense to the way the body responds. And the American diet is the perfect diet to breed inflammation, and inflammation causes disease, and it also causes heart disease and plaquing in the walls. And you know what, guys? This is not just an American problem anymore. China now has the same problem. China now has a growing obesity issue. But you know what? China now has a fast food restaurant on every corner, and have really eat a lot like Americans do now. And for the first time in the history of China, more people are way too much than way too little in China. First time in history. More people are overweight than underweight in China. And so this is the great low-fat diet failure of the 90s. And some doctors are still stuck in it, and it's time to move on. Look at the new research. Give up on the low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet because it's killing people. Now, the paleo diet is all the rage. And, paleo diet's similar to Atkins diet. And I agree with a lot of the principles of the paleo diet and of the Atkins diet and of the Mediterranean diet. All of these things are pretty similar. But they looked at Paleolithic early humans, and they found almost no signs of these degenerative type diseases. If you look at the new paleo pyramid they've come up with, meats and fish are on bottom. And right above that is fruit and vegetables. And then above that is nuts. And so I really like this food pyramid. I think that the paleo food pyramid, and I'm sure you can Google it, really makes a lot of sense. But I'll tell you what Paleolithic humans didn't eat, and that's processed foods. Foods that are high in sugar and omega-6 fatty acids create inflammation. And inflammation creates irritation in the arterial walls, and that causes plaquing. Now, omega-3 fatty acids decrease inflammation and promote health. And there is this need to balance omega-6s with omega-3s in our diet, and the ratio should be 1-to-1. You should have 1 omega-6 and 1 omega-3. And the ratio might be as much as 20 or 25-to-1 inflammatory to non-inflammatory food. But sugar is one of the real causes of heart disease. And so if you can imagine someone 30 years old, they wake up, their stress hormones are through the roof. So their cortisol is through the roof. They have 3 or 4 cups of coffee, then they stop at Starbucks, they get a bran muffin that's like 900 calories and 50 grams of sugar or whatever it is. Their pancreas goes, my gosh, we have all of this sugar. Let's rush with insulin. And then they go sit at a desk all day, and that insulin goes nowhere but into fat. And so sugar is the cause of inflammation and heart disease, among other things. So the other bad thing that I wanted to tell you about sugar is that proteins, normal healthy proteins in your body, as they move through your body, are somewhat slippery, meaning that they can slide through your tissues very easily, kind of like minnows. Now, sugar attaches to those proteins and makes them sticky, like cotton candy, so that these proteins can no longer slip through your body and they get stuck in your small vessels of your body. Like if it's your eyes, you get blindness and diabetes. If it's your lower limbs, you get amputated legs and diabetes. If they clog in your kidneys, you may have to go on a dialysis machine. So sugar makes proteins damaging in our body. So then when you add in stress, I have a whole section in the workshop about how stress affects heart disease and blood pressure, and I can show you a way to where I can reduce your body's response to stress. We can't change the stress, but we can change the way your body adapts and deals with stress. So you will leave the workshop with the best understanding of how to take care of your heart and your blood vessels for the rest of your life and not end up with a chronic disease like a heart attack being rushed to the hospital one day. So if you want to register, the workshop is going to be April the 29th. That's Monday night at 6:30 in Broussard. It's called The Truth About High Cholesterol, High Blood Pressure, and Heart Disease. The number for you to register is 837-7174. That's 837-7174. Or you can text the word truth to 77453. It'll pop right up on my computer, and we'll give you a call back Monday and get you registered. Now, in New Iberia, theirs is going to be the following night on Tuesday. Their number is 367-2567. This one's going to fill up quickly, guys, so if you want to come, make sure you call right away. It's 837-7174. We're going to dive into this some more next week on the show. Look this stuff up yourself. Everything I said today was facts. I'm going to see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.